Police say they are looking for the man they say killed a woman who was 8 months pregnant.
Police say Kevin Foe is the father of Ashanti Allen's unborn child and is being charged with murder. Court records show Foe was accused of assaulting Ashanti last fall, and he pleaded guilty to assault of a family member in February and served time in jail. Search teams found the body of the 23-year-old this morning at Chimney Rock Park. Allen was last seen a week ago. Then early Friday morning, her mother says she received a text message from her daughter telling her she was leaving and not coming back. The family didn't think the message was from their daughter because they found all of her belongings in her apartment.
Being pregnant 8 months with my first grandson, I can't even imagine, I can't even tell you how I feel. My body is just completely numb. I don't think I even processed the fact that my daughter is gone.
Citation markers. I kept them here only so the factual base stays traceable. The message came from Ashanti Allen's phone, but her mother knew something was wrong. It was short, cold, final. I am leaving, not coming back. For a young woman 8 months pregnant with baby clothes ready, a hospital bag waiting, and a son almost here, those words did not sound like a goodbye. They sounded like a warning. By the time her family stepped into her apartment, the silence inside told its own story. Her things were still there. The items for the baby were still there. The life she was preparing for had not been packed away, but Ashanti was gone. And somewhere in Houston, a search was beginning that would soon turn into something far heavier than anyone wanted to believe. Because the question was no longer just where Ashanti was. It became who had her phone, who sent that message, and why someone wanted the people who loved her to believe she had walked away. Ashanti Allen was only 23 years old, but everyone around her seemed to understand that she was standing at the edge of a completely new life. She was not just planning for tomorrow. She was preparing for motherhood. Her family knew the name of the baby she was expecting, Jaxon, a name already spoken with love before he ever took his first breath. In homes across Houston, families prepare for babies in small, ordinary ways that become sacred when you look back at them. Clothes folded, supplies gathered, a hospital bag packed, a room or a corner made ready, a mother checking her phone, counting days, moving through life with both excitement and fear in her chest. According to reports, Ashanti was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared in April 2026, and that detail changes the emotional weight of every moment in the story. She was not someone drifting away from responsibility. She was close to delivery, close to holding her son, close to the moment where all the planning and pressure would become real. Her family has described the heartbreak of preparing for a baby, and then suddenly facing a silence so frightening that even one text message felt impossible to accept. The Houston around Ashanti was not some distant, empty place. It was neighborhoods, apartments, roads, family routines, everyday calls, and the ordinary rhythm of people trying to make life work. That is what makes cases like this so unsettling. They do not begin in dark alleys or dramatic places. They begin in normal rooms, in a phone notification, in a mother looking at a message and feeling her stomach drop, in relatives trying to decide whether they are overreacting or whether the person they love is in danger. Ashanti's family seemed to know her closely enough to hear what was missing from that text. It was not just the words, it was the feeling behind them. Families know tone. They know the difference between anger and fear, between distance and danger, between a real decision and something that sounds forced. And when the message said she was leaving and not coming back, her mother reportedly did not believe it sounded like Ashanti at all. That doubt became the first crack in the story. Someone may have wanted everyone else to believe. Because when someone truly leaves, there are signs. Clothes missing, bags gone, a plan, a reason, a pattern. But according to reports, when Ashanti's mother went to check, her daughter's belongings were still there, including baby items and a packed hospital bag. That is not the image of a woman calmly disappearing from her own life. That is the image of a life interrupted. And then there was the vehicle. Reports say the family's white Lincoln SUV was missing. That detail mattered because it suggested movement. Someone had gone somewhere. Someone had taken something. But without Ashanti standing there to explain it, every object became a question. The apartment asked one thing, the text asked another. The missing vehicle asked something else entirely. At the center of the case was another name, Kevin Foe. According to Houston police, Foe was 24 years old and was later identified as the father of Ashanti's unborn child. He would eventually be charged with capital murder in the 228th Criminal District Court. But at this point in the timeline, the story was still unfolding, and legally, a charge is not a conviction. Still, his name would become inseparable from the investigation. Police would later say detectives developed him as the suspect, and what came out afterward would make the earlier timeline feel even more chilling. But before the public knew the legal details, before headlines and court records and arrest updates, there was just a family trying to find Ashanti. And for them, the fear was immediate. Every hour without her mattered. Every unanswered call mattered. Every small inconsistency felt bigger because Ashanti was not just missing alone. Her unborn son was missing with her. What makes this case so painful is the contrast between what Ashanti was preparing for and what her family suddenly had to prepare themselves to face. One day, the center of attention was supposed to be a baby, a due date, a new beginning. The next, it became a search, a missing person report, volunteers, police, family members trying to hold on to hope while the details around them became harder and harder to explain. According to reporting, Ashanti disappeared on April 10, 2026. That date became the point where ordinary life split into before and after. Before April 10, there was anticipation. After April 10, there were questions. Why would a pregnant woman so close to delivery leave without her hospital bag? Why would she abandon the things prepared for her baby? Why would she send a message that her own mother believed did not sound like her? And perhaps the most haunting question was this: if Ashanti did not send that message willingly, then who wanted her family to believe she had? That is where the story begins to shift, because at first families often hope for the simplest explanation. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, maybe she needed space, maybe her phone died, maybe she would walk back through the door and explain everything. But the details did not settle, they tightened. The silence stretched. And soon, the people searching for Ashanti were not just looking for a missing pregnant woman. They were following a trail that seemed to grow darker with every step. The first hours after someone disappears are filled with confusion, but in Ashanti's case, confusion quickly turned into alarm. The text message did not calm her family. It did the opposite. It raised the first serious red flag because it appeared to offer an explanation that did not match the life Ashanti had left behind. She was 8 months pregnant. She had baby items waiting. She had a hospital bag. She had a family expecting her to bring a child into the world soon. So when the message arrived saying she was leaving and not coming back, it sounded less like closure and more like a cover. Reports say Ashanti's mother went to her apartment and found things that made the situation feel wrong. Her belongings were still inside. The apartment did not appear to tell the story of someone preparing to vanish. The baby's things had not disappeared with her. That one detail carries enormous emotional force because it speaks louder than any rumor. A mother close to giving birth does not usually leave behind the very things meant to help bring her child safely into the world. According to People, the message sent from Ashanti's phone and the items left behind were central reasons her family became deeply concerned. But that was not the only strange thing. As the search began, investigators and loved ones had to reconstruct the final known movements. In true crime, timelines are often built from fragments: a phone location, a vehicle, a camera, a witness, a statement that sounds almost right but not completely. And in Ashanti's case, the timeline reportedly began pointing toward the person closest to one of the most important parts of her life, the father of her unborn child. According to later reporting from the Houston Chronicle, surveillance allegedly showed Ashanti and Kevin Foe leaving in her vehicle around 2:20 in the morning on April 10. That detail is important because it placed them together near the beginning of the disappearance timeline, according to those reports. But what investigators would later examine was not only who she was last seen with, it was what allegedly happened afterward. At this stage, everything must be said carefully. These are allegations and reported details, not final court findings. Kevin Foe is charged, but the legal process must still run its course. Still, according to court-based reporting, there were claims of alarming behavior after Ashanti disappeared. The Chronicle reported that Foe allegedly contacted someone after that point and made a deeply concerning statement. For a documentary, what matters is not to sensationalize that moment, but to understand why investigators saw the timeline as urgent and why the family's fear only grew. Meanwhile, Ashanti's family was not waiting passively. They were looking, they were checking, they were trying to make sense of what did not fit. Reports say her brother tracked her phone to a location connected to Foe's mother's home. That alone would have made any family ask hard questions. If Ashanti was leaving by choice, why was her phone trace leading there? And if someone had seen her, why was she still not answering? According to the Houston Chronicle's reporting, Foe allegedly told family members he had not seen Ashanti in about a week. But that claim, if accurate, would sit uneasily against the reported surveillance timeline placing them together around the time she disappeared. That is the kind of inconsistency that changes an investigation. Not because one contradiction proves everything, but because it tells investigators where to look again. It tells them the story being told may not match the evidence being gathered. And while all of this was happening, another painful layer began to form. This was not the first time Ashanti's relationship with Foe had reportedly raised concern. Multiple outlets reported that Foe had previously faced a continuous family violence charge involving Ashanti, and that he accepted a plea deal in February 2026 that reduced the charge to a misdemeanor. According to the Houston Chronicle, her family later said they did not know about that plea deal until after her disappearance. That detail has become one of the most emotionally charged parts of the case, because for Ashanti's loved ones, it raised a devastating question. Could something more have been done before April 10? This is where a true crime story becomes more than a timeline. It becomes a mirror. It forces viewers to think about warning signs, legal systems, family fear, and the gap that sometimes exists between what loved ones sense and what institutions are able or willing to stop. And if you are watching this, pay attention to that gap, because in this case, it may be one of the most important parts of the story. As days passed, the search expanded. Texas EquiSearch, a volunteer search organization known for helping families in difficult missing person cases, assisted in the search for Ashanti. Search teams and investigators were no longer dealing with only a confusing text or a missing SUV. They were facing a pregnant woman missing for days under circumstances that looked increasingly suspicious. Every search has a quiet emotional rhythm. Hope rises with each new lead, then falls when it does not bring the person home. Families replay conversations. They look for meaning in the smallest things. What did she say last? Did she sound afraid? Was she planning something? Did anyone notice a change? But in Ashanti's case, the items left behind kept pulling everyone back to the same conclusion. This did not feel like a voluntary disappearance. Then, on April 16, the search reached the place no family wants it to reach. Houston police said a woman's body was found near 11,655 Chimney Rock Road at about 9 a.m. The victim was later identified as Ashanti Allen. She was 23. Her unborn child did not survive. Police said Foe was charged with capital murder, and the case moved from a desperate missing person search into a homicide investigation. There are moments in a case when the mystery does not disappear, but the hope changes shape. For Ashanti's family, the question was no longer only where she was. It became how this happened, why it happened, and whether the truth would be strong enough to bring accountability. Because even after Ashanti was found, the story was far from over. What investigators discovered next changed the direction of the case from local search to multi-state manhunt. After Ashanti was found on April 16, police were no longer simply trying to locate a missing woman. They were looking for the man they believed was responsible. Kevin Foe was wanted. He was no longer just a person connected to Ashanti's life. According to Houston police, he was the suspect charged in her death. The official Houston Police Department update was direct. Kevin Foe, 24, was charged with capital murder in the 228th Criminal District Court. Ashanti Allen, 23, was identified as the victim. The body had been found near Chimney Rock Road, and on April 20, Foe was arrested in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, by members of the U.S. Marshals Service. But the path to that arrest included details that sound almost unreal. According to Houston Chronicle reporting, Foe allegedly fled to Louisiana on a Greyhound bus and went to meet someone he had connected with online. The same reporting says he allegedly warned that person not to search his name because of his alleged involvement in Ashanti's disappearance. That person later alerted authorities, according to the report. If true, that detail matters because it shows how quickly a case can turn on the decision of one person to speak up. By April 20, the search for Foe ended in Louisiana. The U.S. Marshals arrested him, and reports said he was expected to be extradited back to Harris County. But even with an arrest, the case did not become simple. The justice system still had to determine what could be proven in court. The family still had to bury Ashanti and baby Jaxon, and the public still had to wrestle with the uncomfortable history that had surfaced around the relationship. At a vigil at Chimney Rock Park, where more than 100 people reportedly gathered, Ashanti's family spoke not only with grief, but with anger. They questioned how a man with a reported prior case involving Ashanti could have been free. They questioned whether the system had failed her before the final tragedy. Those questions do not require anyone to ignore due process. They require something deeper, an honest look at how danger can build before it becomes a headline. The prior legal history is one of the biggest turning points in understanding the emotional weight of this case. Reports say Foe had been charged with continuous family violence involving Ashanti before her disappearance, but the case was resolved through a plea deal in February 2026 that reduced the charge to a misdemeanor. The Houston Chronicle reported that he was released the same day because of time already served, and Ashanti's family said they were unaware of the plea agreement until after she disappeared. Again, these details come from reporting and court-related accounts, and they should be framed carefully. But for Ashanti's family, they became part of the larger question: who saw the warning signs and what happened after that? This is where Ashanti's story becomes painfully larger than one case. It speaks to the fear many families carry when someone they love is in a dangerous relationship. It speaks to the difficulty of proving danger before the worst happens. It speaks to how a person can be surrounded by people who love them and still be vulnerable in private spaces where outsiders do not always see what is happening. And it also speaks to the power of instinct. Ashanti's mother reportedly knew the text did not sound right. She did not simply accept the message as truth. She checked. She looked deeper. She noticed what had been left behind. That instinct did not save Ashanti in the end, but it mattered. It helped turn confusion into urgency. It helped push the search forward. It helped keep Ashanti from being reduced to a message on a screen. The known truth, as currently reported, is this: Ashanti Allen disappeared on April 10, 2026. She was 8 months pregnant. Her family received a troubling text from her phone and believed it did not sound like her. When they checked her apartment, important belongings and baby items were reportedly still there. Her body was found on April 16 near Chimney Rock Road in southwest Houston. Houston police identified Kevin Foe, the father of her unborn child, as the suspect, and he was charged with capital murder. He was arrested in Louisiana on April 20 by U.S. Marshals and was expected to face the case in Harris County. But the unresolved questions are the ones that linger after the timeline ends. What exactly happened in the hours after Ashanti was reportedly last seen? Who sent the message from her phone? What did investigators recover from the vehicle, the phone records, the surveillance, and the reported communications. What did the prior legal case reveal, and what did it fail to prevent? Those are the questions that may become central as the court process moves forward. For viewers, the emotional core of this case should never be lost under the legal details. Ashanti Allen was not just a case name. She was a daughter, a young woman, a mother-to-be, someone preparing for the arrival of a child her family already loved. The most painful part of the story is not just that she vanished. It is that she vanished at a moment when life should have been expanding around her, a moment when every plan was supposed to point forward. There is a quiet cruelty in the image of that packed hospital bag. It represents hope, preparation, trust in the future. It represents a young woman expecting to leave her home for one reason, to bring her baby back. Instead, when her family looked for signs of her, that bag became evidence of everything that did not make sense. And maybe that is why this case has reached so many people, because it begins with something almost everyone understands, a message that feels wrong, a mother's instinct, a room left too still, a family realizing that the explanation they have been given is not the truth. Ashanti's story is still moving through the legal system, and Kevin Foe remains presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in court. But the grief her family carries is already real. The absence is real. The baby clothes, the hospital bag, the plans that never happened, all of that is real. In the end, this case leaves behind more than a criminal charge. It leaves behind a warning about listening when something feels off. It leaves behind questions about protection, accountability, and how quickly a life can disappear behind a few words on a screen. And it leaves behind the memory of Ashanti and baby Jaxon, not as headlines, but as people loved deeply by a family now asking the world not to look away. So the question is not only what happened to Ashanti Allen. The harder question is this: when the warning signs are already there, how many people have to notice before someone is truly protected? If Ashanti's story stayed with you, share your thoughts below. Do you believe the warning signs were taken seriously enough before it was too late? And if you want more carefully told true crime stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next case.